got a question sent in, another one from one of our listeners, Jackie Thomas from Evesham, who asks, why should Britain be the poor relation to other European countries with high-speed rail? Surely this needs to happen for jobs and to boost transport links across the UK. They're doing it in other countries. If the Prime Minister's right and we're in a global race, don't we want to be racing them with high-speed trains, Joe Rukin?
Well, it depends what the race is, if it's the race for high-speed trains or the race for the greatest amount of debt. When you compare us, it's a great fallacy that we don't have high-speed rail in this country, because high-speed rail starts at 124 miles an hour. We've had it since the 1970s. It's called the West Coast Main Line, the East Coast Main Line, even the Midland Main Line this year will become a high-speed railway. And when you look at the journey times between our capital and our major cities, we come top against our 5 closest European competitors. This idea that we don't have high-speed railways and we don't have good connectivity is an absolute fallacy. What we don't have is we don't have a ridiculous, well, we do, we don't have a ridiculously extra overpriced rail service that is simply the preserve of the richest in society. And that's what having high-speed rail will mean. It's already far too expensive to use our railways. The costs go up against inflation again and again and again. And the reality is that HS2 will be a preserve of the richest in society. That's what the sustainable development...
If it's all for the rich, Joe, why are so many people travelling by train? Why are the numbers going up
all
so
over
rapidly?
Europe as well?
They're not going up anything like as quick in other European countries as they are in this country. In fact, they're stalling in countries like France at the moment.
Yeah, these are short
distance.
You know very well that these are the short distance commuter routes. They are not the long distance journeys. As I said, the last set of figures from the ORR, the Office of Rail Regulation, showed a 0.3%
Sorry,
increase.
Joe, the figures produced the day before yesterday by the ORR show that in the last quarter of last year, the number of long-distance journeys were 1.8% higher than they were in the last quarter of 2012.
High-speed rail is not the preserve of the rich on the European mainland, and market forces will dictate what the pricing is like. There'll be off-peak fares on the high-speed train. They've just got to fill the trains.
Well, that's not what the president of SNCF
I agree
says.
with the listener who phoned in and said we've got to catch up with the rest of Europe and link our high-speed rail systems to theirs. Whether or not we remain in the European Union, we'll have trade and leisure travel and business travel all over Europe.
That's a whole separate debate.
In France, the president of SNCF, Guillaume Pepe, has said that because they've had to reduce the subsidies, and that's another thing you've got to look at HS2, how much is it going to be subsidised? But because you've had to reduce the subsidies, the dream of the the TGV being the normal means of travel and not the preserve of the business elite is at an end, as prices have doubled in the last 10 years.
Absolutely, and Joe Rukin's just virtually taken the words out of my mouth, because I'd made exactly the same note. The president of SNCF, these people who are used as the model for what we could do because the French have done it, the president of their railway is saying the TGVs have been overinvested in, and the result has been that commuter trains have deteriorated because money is being spent on these fast trains instead of on the basic things that can improve the real lives of most people. And therefore the French system is now moving away from this focus on the TGV and moving into investing in what we should be doing, which is better commuter lines. And also in the Netherlands, in Belgium, in Portugal, in Spain, they're re-looking at all these ideas they had at one stage of having high-speed trains, and they're saying actually we don't want to go ahead with these because
they've got
the real yes, but what they were looking at is further developments in this area, and they are saying no, we're not going to do that now.
I'd like to ask somebody on the panel, it's something we hear a lot about, the idea of HS2 being able to bridge the north-south divide, try and spread wealth around the country. Can you explain to the layman, how does that actually work? What's the theory behind it?
The theory behind it is that instead of, as I said earlier, everyone seems to focus on the linking of HS2 with London, but HS2 has two functions. One is to relieve the West Coast Main Line at the southern end, south of the Midlands.
Mike O'Brien, former Trade and Industry Minister, something needs to be done, doesn't it, to try and spread the wealth around the UK? Stop it all being down in the southeast?
And absolutely. And the way we improve the quality of life in places like Manchester and Liverpool and Birmingham and in Coventry is that we get good commuter travel for people who need to get to work. We get people out of their cars and into decent, good quality mass transit systems.
Peter Hughes, one of the arguments in favour of HS2 is the extra space it will release for freight.
We've got too many trains and not enough tracks in this country, so we need more tracks. That's why we need HS2. That will release room for freight, of course it will.
Joe Rukin, how long can we keep relying on our existing infrastructure before we start investing in new infrastructure?
Well, we've always advocated investing in infrastructure. The reality is that what's going to give you the best return on your investment. And HS2 is most definitely not it. You can't argue that building a brand new railway line doesn't improve capacity. Of course it will improve capacity. But the question is, can you make those gains without spending so much money, but also, and far more importantly, delivering the benefits where they're actually needed? Because this is a real problem with HS2, is it's not addressing the problem at hand. The problem at hand is not the long distance in city commutes, and HS2 as well is absolutely terrible in terms of interconnectivity. Because, you've got a brand new station in Birmingham, two brand new stations in Birmingham that are not connected to the existing ones. You've got Towton in on the outskirts of Nottingham, which is basically middle of nowhere. Meadowhall in Sheffield, when Sheffield City Council are absolutely desperate to stop the exasperation of the donut effect and get it in the city centre. And again at Leeds, it's a new lane. It's on the other side of the river from Central Station now. So you don't actually provide the interconnectivity and therefore you actually lose all the benefits that you have from high-speed rail. And a moment ago you asked what the theory behind HS2 being this magic wand that would cure the north-south divide is. And the theory was that the proponents of HS2 had put up a load of ridiculous arguments that had got knocked down by a feather, so they had to put up another ridiculous argument that got knocked down by a feather. This idea that HS2 is going to miraculously cure the north-south divide has been put up simply to try and buy in more people from the north. And oddly enough, when you look at the polls, you've actually got greater opposition to HS2 in the north than you have in the south. In fact, oddly enough, the only place they say that it's not about London. The only region that actually supports it overall is London.
Professor Moore, do we need HS2 to have the transformational effect that its supporters claim, or can it be solved elsewhere?
I think you can achieve a transformational impact on the region without HS2, but HS2 is the catalyst to make sure that happens, that everybody gets together and decides what they want. So
we need HS2 to start with?
I'm not arguing about whether it should go ahead or not, but if it does go ahead, it should go ahead in a way that actually brings people together and acts as a catalyst for transformation. So that includes looking at different kinds of economic models at a wider area than the 60 metres the very limited area that people are looking at the moment. And looking at it at a longer time scale as well, not just the disruption of when it's happened, but in the long term how that can be used as a way to improve the region as a whole.
Joe Rukin, you say it's a boondoggle of an idea. I'm not entirely sure what a boondoggle is, but wouldn't it be more...
American phrase from the New Deal period, where you built things for the sake of building them rather than for a particular purpose.
I feel like I'm on Call My Bluff.
It's a thing.
Would it be more boondoggle though, Joe, if that's the correct use, probably not, of the word, to now, after all the years of planning and all the money spent in the process, just to tear everything up and start again?
What do you want to do? Keep throwing good money after bad? As that's what you would be doing if you go ahead with HS2. The problem is, it was just touched on is that there was never an assessment of what was best for Britain's transport infrastructure. It was just, oh, well, other countries have got high-speed rail, we've got to have it, even though we've already got it, and it's going to have to go 250 miles an hour. And that was based, so we best draw a route, so we've got something coming into the election, and that was it. There was never an assessment of what was best for Britain's transport infrastructure. It was just high-speed rail, we've got to have it, and you can trace that all the way back to the 2006 Eddington report, where it said, you know, decisions about high-speed rail projects were not informed by detailed appraisal of high-speed rail projects or alternatives which would achieve the same objectives, but they have been driven on by strong lobbying from advocates. And that's the real issue, that there are alternatives out there, whether that is a different version of high-speed rail, a slower, less intrusive one that will cost less and definitely cost less to run, or existing infrastructure improvements.
But isn't this one of the problems, Peter Hughes, because we haven't done something like this for so long, on this scale, and because we're talking about something so far in the future, actually pinning down facts is very difficult, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and we're having a very healthy debate here and all over the country, but if we'd had this vibrant democracy in the 18th and 19th centuries, I wonder if the objectors would have stopped the building of the canals and the sewers and the railways in the first place. We can only be glad that we have this healthy debate, but really we mustn't stop progress.
That leads me on quite nicely and neatly to a final question. Please, brief answers from each one of our panellists, and I do mean brief. Will this project go ahead? And if so, what will be the implication of it? Peter Hughes.
Yes, it will go ahead, and I quote from a recent press comment. This debate, incidentally, has been very good-natured. I don't want to do anything to change that. But this comment envisaged after HS2 is built, our children and grandchildren, benefiting from science fiction-style ease of movement, will no doubt look back at the debates about HS2 as a purge on progress, the near victory of backward-looking Philistines over a brave new world.
Professor Catherine Moore, will this project go ahead? What will the implication of it be?
I think it'll be the catalyst for to continue the great landscape traditions that this country is renowned for, and to achieve transformation from London right up to Scotland.
Mike O'Brien.
I don't think it will go ahead, because I think the costs argument will compellingly force the decision not to go ahead with it. Also, I'm an optimist, and I'm trying very hard to convince the Labour leadership to move against HS2, and I hope I'm going to succeed. And what will be the consequence of that? Well, I hope that we will still be funding through £50 billion or more the future of railways in Britain, but it will be commuter lines in big cities, not just in London but in the provinces too, so that we do boost regional economies, we do encourage the expansion and job creation, but that we do it in a much better way than HS2 ever will.
Alan Marshall.
Well, I sincerely hope that it will go ahead, and if it doesn't go ahead, then I see us internationally going even further down the league than we are already. We're already rated 34th by the OECD for our infrastructure, so it'll just get worse.
And finally, Joe Rukin, will it go ahead? What will the implication of it be?
I think it would be an absolute disaster if HS2 goes ahead, because it will be a financial basket case. The passenger forecasts that are predicted will never turn up. The projected benefits will never turn up. The costs will keep going up, and it will be a millstone round the neck of future generations, because it's not just how much it will cost to build and the loans that will have to be serviced to pay for that debt, but also the running costs of something which will never ever make a profit, and therefore every year afterwards will be a strain and a drain on our national resources. And I think if HS2 goes ahead, what we'll find is the generations of the future will ask, why was so much money spent, why was so much money invested on what is effectively by backwards-looking politicians on what is effectively a 19th century solution to the needs of a 21st century economy.
The Forum was a Quidem News production, researched by Tanya Nerona and presented and produced by me, Seb Noble.